from the Signature Bank Studios.
Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. If Trump did indeed deal the cultural Marxists a body blow when it comes to their identitarian politics, as we were discussing with Jonah Goldberg, if he has left the left unable to talk cogently about politics in a way that has any particular appeal, don't tell that to MSNBC and Elie Mystal. Elie Mystal is, the fat Don King guy. He is always channeling his inner Keith Olbermann because the race hustle transcends race. And this is his offering. I mean, there is the double and triple down crowd, and that is where the MSNBC talkers are attempting to lead the party.
They told you exactly what they were going to do and exactly how you were going to do it. And a majority of white people voted for this. This is the disgusting version of America that people want. And oh, by the way, eggs are still more expensive. So you didn't even get that. Great job, white folks. In terms of how we cover it as a media or as a media group, right? We have to stop acting like any of these things have any basis in reality, right? Your earlier segment about birthright citizenship is a perfect example of how you should cover it. There is no question about whether or not birthright citizenship is constitutional. It just is, right? There is no question about whether or not the Civil Rights Act should apply. It just does. And every time the media tries to sane wash Trump, whitewash Trump, explain Trump, defend Trump, what they're doing is muddying the waters on these issues that we have already decided, right? And I'm not saying that there's not a place for nuance. I actually wrote in The Nation about how if Trump wants to end DEI programs, that's legal. DEI is a policy. DEI is a policy invented by white folks who try to stop other white folks from being racist. If they want to end the policy, the next media question shouldn't be like, oh my God, you're ending DEI. The next media question should be, okay, so what are you doing to combat racism in employment and hiring? What are you doing to combat sexism in employment and hiring in the federal government, the largest employer in the country? Because if the answer is nothing, well, then that becomes illegal. Well, then that violates the Civil Rights Act. That violates the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, the Equal Protection Clause. So the question has to be, fine, you want to end DEI, what's next, right? It's all like, you're going to repeal it. What are you going to replace it with? Because just going back to antebellum racism, that's what's illegal.
There's nothing more dangerous than someone with a law degree that thinks they're smart. And Elie Mystal, just because they have the law degree, Elie Mystal answers his own question, but he's too busy hyperventilating to recognize the answer. What replaces DEI? The 14th Amendment and the Civil Rights Act? Oh, yeah. But it's more, it's not really about that, and it's not about substantive discussion. It's about what he's saying, which is we have to continue to treat Trump as an interloper who presents an existential threat to our democracy, and none of what he says is real, and every debate we say is settled, and we will hear no countervailing opinions. Well, that's an approach. That's an approach the Democrats could take. But our next guest, Zaid Jilani, suggests perhaps another. Zaid Jilani is a journalist and communications consultant based in Atlanta. He is also the author of the American Saga newsletter, theamericansaga.com, to subscribe to that. Zaid, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
What's your response to Mystal and the MSNBC crowd? I think he's a fair representative. Is that the way the congressional Dems should go?
Look, I think that the Democrats are an opposition party right now, right? So obviously they are going to oppose certain things. We saw that with the vote on Pete Hegseth, who just became head of the DOD. But on the other hand, the question is this. Do the Democrats want to accomplish nothing over the next 4 years? Do they want to have no input into major legislation? Do they want to have no input into these major appointments? And do they want to show voters that they're not serious about tackling problems where the Republicans have the lion's share of public opinion, like immigration, for instance, right? And I think the answer for a lot of Democrats increasingly is no. I think we saw this, for instance, on the vote on the Lincoln-Riley Act, right? We saw, I think it was about a dozen Democrats in the Senate and several dozen in the House who decided to vote with the Republicans on this measure because they felt like ultimately, despite any qualms they had about the way it was structured or certain civil liberties concerns, it was either a matter of working with Republicans who have the power to actually work on this illegal immigration issue, or just to say that they're not going to do anything, right? So I think a lot of Democrats are waking up to this idea that sometimes, yes, they are going to disagree with the Republicans, and they can't meet Trump in the middle. But on a lot of issues, look, Americans do want progress, and just sitting there and sitting out from the party, right, and not participating, I think, is not going to help them politically, and it's not going to be good for the country, right? Because I think a lot of times the best legislation, the best appointments, the best executive action is meeting people in the middle and compromising, right? And if they choose not to engage, we could end up with a lot worse legislation, I think.
Well, I mean, the other thing they have going for them, the Democrats, if they want to take this more iconoclastic approach, is, people in the Senate like Murkowski and Collins, and as we found out with the Hegseth vote, McConnell and others that'll be squishy on some issues. And then obviously you've got just a couple of seat majority in the House. So, there's always the opportunity to partner with what I would call Republican quislings in the House and Senate to stop Trump's legislative agenda as well.
Yeah, look, I mean, we have to understand something. In our political system, we say we have two major political parties, but really they're both large coalitions, right? There you have social conservatives and fiscal conservatives, populists, all of them in the Republican Party. On the Democratic side, you have people who are a little bit more libertarian leaning in their cultural attitudes and beliefs in economics, like Jerry Polis, and then you also have people who are, I think, more on the hard left. You have moderates. When you have two large party coalitions like that, not only will they disagree among each other, but sometimes you'll have coalitions of people who agree across parties, right? So I think, as I just mentioned earlier on the immigration issues, I think a lot of the Democrats who are from the Midwest or from the South actually do feel, or their constituents at least do feel like we have to do much more about illegal immigration. And I think that's why they were willing to work with the Republicans on those issues. So, yeah, I mean, and it cuts the other way, right? I think with if you're a senator from Maine, for instance, I think a lot of your constituents are going to be very anti-Trump, right? So I think that they're going to be pandering more in that direction. So, yeah, I do think both in terms of supporting and in opposing, you'll see these interesting currents and coalitions form.
I also think that they're losing, in addition to sort of losing the identitarian appeal, they're also losing, and you sort of point to this in your piece in Compact, that they're losing this idea that Trump is an agent of chaos and he is something that is so abnormal and foreign to our politics. Maybe the way that he communicates in certain respects, but I think that's even a bit overblown at this point. But certainly not in the way that he makes policies and takes out policy positions. And so I think the attempt to demagogue him with histrionics about sort of style and political norms, I think that is also losing currency because the last administration was just so lacking in competence.
Well, look, I think something that I've noticed is that Trump is several days a week. Trump is meeting with reporters, talking to reporters, nonstop, right? Which is actually quite a sea change from what happened with Biden, who rarely did press conferences, who rarely met with reporters, and even Kamala Harris, who was much younger, had a very kind of arm's length approach to the press. And I think the fact that Trump is doing this is actually earning him a lot of credit among the American people, because I don't think, I think the way that everything that was done with the Biden White House in terms of concealing his sort of true state and his decline, I think really soured people, right? And so Trump, I think, is using that to his advantage. And I think as far as the Democrats go, I think that they would behoove themselves to kind of take advantage of that, right? To also make themselves similarly available to press, to be increasingly transparent, to kind of help turn the page on the Biden era, right? We have to remember that Biden left office with an approval rating that was almost historically low, like it was pretty close to how Trump left in 2021, right? Which is actually pretty bad, and they have a hole to dig themselves out of. And I think, what happened yesterday, for instance, right, with Trump having the dispute with Colombia, I think a lot of Democrats instantly jumped on that saying, okay, coffee is going to be more expensive because Trump is going to put these big tariffs on Colombia. all this happened. But really, by the end of the day, they had resolved their dispute with them, right? I mean, it was a negotiation tactic, right? And so I think sometimes jumping the gun too quickly also can be an error for the Democrats.
Yeah, Columbia caved quickly. I wanted to talk to you about the cabinet picks because you and Rich Lowry is saying no to Tulsi Gabbard, and you wrote an article in National Review about that. But you think Gabbard would advocate for less war and save more lives. Why?
Yeah, look, I reported about Gabbard. Probably I did my first article about her in 2015. She's always been somewhat of an iconoclast, right? She's kind of struck out to different positions, one when she was a Democrat and two now when she was a Republican. I understand some of the concerns about her. I mean, I think she has tried to engage more with countries like Russia, with the previous Syrian government than people in America were comfortable with. But the reality is the best presidents, the most effective presidents we've ever had, they tend to have a diverse team of people. You know, people talk about Lincoln's team of rivals, people who I think can offer those different perspectives and have a seat at the table. It doesn't mean that every cabinet official should be like Tulsi Gabbard and have kind of our heterodox views, but having someone at the table with them, I think, is a good exercise in kind of having like a B team or a red team, right? Someone who can point out the flaws in our logic, think about other ways to engage on these things. And I think particularly when it comes to the DNI position, right? Because I think our intelligence agencies, you know, I think one of the big risks with them is being captured by groupthink, right? Thinking that a certain country can only be engaged with in one way, or that there's only one kind of conception of our threats. I mean, one of the things that Trump is trying to do right now is roll down the war in Ukraine, right? And I think part of that is going to be convincing Russia that it's not in their interest to continue the war, right? To come to some kind of compromise or settlement. And having people who have a history of engaging with Russia is part of that. And I think that's what he did successfully in the Middle East, right? He brought in someone who has relationships with both the Israelis and some of the Gulf Arab countries, and he was able to negotiate very quickly and effectively compared to the Biden administration. So, you know, these relationships, yes, I think the Republicans are right to question them and give her a fair hearing on them. But on the other hand, they can be advantageous, right? It's good to have someone who has the ears of even some of our rivals and kind of the countries that we're concerned about as well.
Zaid Jilani is a journalist and communications consultant based in Atlanta. His newsletter, The American Saga, theamericansaga.com. And Zaid, before I let you go, is your favorite movie Little Miss Sunshine by any chance?
Oh yeah, I love it. I actually saw an early screening before it actually came out to everyone else in the country, and I remember coming dressed up as one of the characters. And so I was infatuated with the movie before it ever came out, but once I actually saw it, I thought, no, it's one of my favorite comedies. So for sure.
Well, I know that because you got a screenshot on your X profile. But now, so did you dress up as the Carell character, as the Proust professor?
Not actually. It wasn't the Carell character. It was the teenager with the
oh yes,
where he had the Nietzsche shirt, and painted on him. So yeah, I thought. Yeah, it's a really fun movie. If anyone hasn't seen it, it's just a really good, lighthearted kind of family comedy. So,
a great movie, great cast too. Greg Kinnear and Adam Arkin. Okay,
I'm going to see the movie again now.
Yeah, a bit of a cinephile. Glad to see that. Zaid Jilani, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Definitely, yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, and he joined us on our Turnkey.pro answer line.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
While Dennis Prager is recuperating, we know you miss your daily dose of Dennis. That's why Pragertopia is giving you a special gift. Right now, Pragertopia members can hear the